The cognitive overload that it takes to try to meet impossible standards is such a drag on your energy, on your cognitive ability to think about new ideas, to have a space for creativity or innovation. I think it really can impact your mental health. And I think I've seen too, like in perfectionist cultures, the bar is always moved. You think that you're reaching something or achieving something, you get there and there's a new bar, there's a higher bar. And so you never get that sense of satisfaction of completing something, of succeeding at something, because there's always something else to achieve.
Hi, I'm Lars Gallion.
And I'm Aparna. Welcome to the Circle Back Club, the podcast for anyone who has ever suspected that the problem isn't us. We name what's broken at work, back it up with receipts, and build real power with workers who are done performing. No productivity hacks here, no personal brand advice, just an honest analysis and a community ready to change the status quo.
Yeah, we are here to reimagine and rebuild workplaces, to strengthen communities instead of depleting them, to see your coworker as your comrade, not your competition, and to stand up for the dignity and care of all humans and this beautiful planet together. And today, we're going to talk about the ideal corporate worker. Well, the image of the perfect worker. We probably all have someone or some way of being that comes to mind, whether it's the parody of corporate work, welcome to Circle Back Club, or maybe it's an ideal that you've tried to be or you're still striving towards. People write books and build careers around perfecting the best way to be in corporate work, from what you're wearing to the way you speak, how you spend your time. Now we're all flexing AI fluency. Today, we're going to get into some of the research that helped us to understand the ideal worker. And of course, talk about the cost to ourselves and others when we try to meet this very specific type of corporate perfection and reimagine a new ideal that is rooted in community, access, and care. So we're going to talk about performing perfectionism, learn how targeted universalism helps to create a framework that is designed for all people. We are not here to tell you who or how to be. We're here to talk about how we are together in corporate environments and just ask, is this serving our humanity? And we are so lucky to be joined by our friend, Valarie Williams. Welcome to the club, Valarie.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I love you both so much, and I'm excited for our conversation.
We really can't wait. And a little bit about you, y'all. Valarie is the founder and managing partner of Converge Collective, which is a workplace culture strategy house. She's a leadership coach and an autonomy advisor for ambitious women, which feels very relevant for today. So again, welcome. We're so happy to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's warm up a little bit. Given the fact that we are talking about the ideal worker, I'm curious if there is an ideal in either of your lives that you tried to fit into that you just never could. It could be at work or outside of work. Anything come to mind?
You know, for me, I went to business school. And I remember being in business school saying, why am I in business school? You know, my reason for going to business school was that I needed some time to pivot. I knew that I was wanting to go into a different direction with my career. And so that's what everyone was doing at that time. But I felt like I did that because that's what everyone was doing at that time. So that felt like an environment that was not for me. Now, granted, I had a great time. I learned a lot, but that felt off.
Yeah, the ideal that I tried to fit into that I never could, I would have to say it's a pencil skirt. And, you know, as a little chubby human coming out coming out into the workforce at a time when the super low-waisted jeans were in and also the pencil skirts, I just trying to find clothes to go to work in was a little bit traumatic in my early 20s.
Oof, I have stories there. One of my first jobs coming out of college, and this fits with my answer, is needing to perform a certain type of sales role. And I was told that I shouldn't go to a sales appointment without my nails done. Can you imagine? Like, LOL. And that's
Somebody
like,
said that to me like 3 years ago. Yeah.
and like, what are we doing with our hands? Anyways, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, my like the ideal I never fit was my gender presentation. I tried so hard throughout my life, and every year from middle school to college, that in between summer, I was like, I'm going to be feminine this time. And I would straighten my hair, which is, probably ages me a little bit, wore girly clothes, and it would last like 2 weeks. And now I'm Lars. This is who I am. But it took like a really long time to figure out that not only that I didn't want that, but who I actually wanted to be. And I think that's a really interesting theme in this episode too, where when we try to fit within a specific mold or identity, we don't actually have space to figure out who we actually are, whether you're going to business school or wearing a pencil skirt or whatever it is, So I appreciate those answers. So let's set this up. I probably read too much research in prepping for this episode, and I'm finding that as a host, I think I am going to just be we're both
The
geeks,
nerd.
but it's
You're a nerd. I literally you sent me a text message yesterday where you're like, I'm still working on the script for this. And I was like, how? I feel like we wrote the script together already last week.
Yeah,
when
we literally did. Yeah. But then I read.
I love it.
And I do think it's helpful because when we talk about the ideal worker, I think we could look at it in different ways. And just to clarify for our listeners and what we're getting after today, one way you could think about the ideal worker is what a good employee looks like good employee attributes, kind of like when we talk about what a productive worker is. And there's endless studies on this that are traits that we probably all agree with, like communication, teamwork, adaptability, integrity, empathy, initiative, willingness to learn, all of those traits that are universal soft skills and obviously an ideal way to work in regards to the way that you treat and engage with other people. Alternatively, and what we're trying to actually look at today is the ideal worker in the sense of the type of worker we actually experience behaviorally at work. So that's reinforced by the culture norms, obviously, like the way the business is set up and the way that they reinforce whatever the culture is. And what we're interested in talking about is what does the pursuit of trying to be an ideal worker do to us as people? The ideal, something that we are striving towards to show our allegiance, so that includes the way of working, location, time spent, communication channels, access or choice to take parental leave or your presentation of self. That all has these policies and programs that kind of reinforce that expectation. And these aren't all inherently wrong. I don't think that's really the point of the episode. But in the United States, we have one of the worst family, medical, and parental leave policies literally in the world. So there's also a lot to talk about, which is exactly what we're doing. But that's the focus of this type of striving towards ideal. So Valarie, I'm curious, just like right out of the gate, when you hear the ideal corporate worker, who comes to mind for you?
Well, the first term that came to mind was unbridled devotion. I think about the people that you encounter at work that are just like, they have the company's name tatted on their chest. It's like, they are all of beneath. They work their 16-hour days. They go home, they do their 1 hour at home, and then they're back online. I just think about that person that that you encounter at work that is all about the company. And I've definitely encountered those people throughout my career.
Yeah, when I think about the ideal corporate worker, as somebody who's never worked in corporate, right? So that is, I only know corporate culture because they've been my clients, but I've never been an employee in, let's say, a big Fortune 1000 company. And when I think of ideal corporate worker, I think subservience, and
Mm.
I think similar to of being using corporate speak, seeking alignment, and lots of PowerPoint presentations, lots of meetings to decide when you're going to have other meetings, to, order swag.
Mm.
Right? Like, how many meetings does it take to order swag? So those are the kind of things that I think about when I think of the ideal corporate worker. It's somebody who's not asking a lot of questions. They're definitely devoted. And depending on the industry, they also look a certain way. They also have this like physical appearance, where I think in tech, it's very normal, especially for men, to wear Tivas and socks. Which, for the record, I find actually a little disgusting. Um, but that doesn't really apply to the women that work in tech, right? Like, they can't quite look that mousy. So they have to look a little bit put together. And Lars, I'm thinking about this video that we watched by an influencer in December. You and I were watching this video, and this woman is like, "Yeah, right. Like, so if you're working in this industry, this is how you should dress." And while no one should go to work in pajamas or their house coat, that right, like, she was so stern with whoever the audience was that she was speaking to, where she's like, do your makeup, do your nails, right? Like, put on your suit. And so, yeah, Valarie, you're like, yes.
I mean, what came to mind when you were saying, you talked about the tech guys, but what about the sales guys, right? You can
Oof.
go to lunch
Yes.
anywhere at
Yeah.
a restaurant and sit at a bar, and you can see the white and the blue collared shirts, and listen to the conversations. That's the ideal worker. They're having their sales calls, they're getting ready for their next meeting. So that's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, and to both your points, there's both obviously like that balance of devotion and performance. And part of this episode is getting curious about what is the cost of that. If you like it, if you're into it, yeah, that's a wonderful thing. And that has a systematic impact on the way that the world runs around you. And the first time that the ideal worker was named and studied was by a University of Oregon professor named Joan Acker, who passed away in 2016. And in 1990, she published a really important paper called Hierarchies, Jobs, Bodies, a Theory of Gendered Organizations. And the study said that the ideal worker was exactly as you described, Valarie, someone who prioritizes work above everything else, is fully devoted to the organization, and embraces work as the primary identity. And when you bring gender into it, that is reinforced through division of labor, the cultural symbols, how you interact, your own identity, the logic of the company. And so what she's saying, and I think it's super relevant still today, is that the way that we prioritize the job also reinforces the gender norm, or the gendered ideal worker. And here we are in 2026. Aparna sent this to me, and I was shocked. There's a recent study that we'll link in the show notes, finding that Gen Z men are twice as likely as baby boomers to believe wives should obey their husbands.
Interesting.
Have you not
Well,
seen the study?
I have not seen the study. Please,
It's like, it's so insane. Okay, but also the women are getting more conservative. Also, the Gen Z women are getting more conservative, and they're aspiring to the stay-at-home girlfriend
Yeah,
and the
trad
trad
wife.
wife. Yeah.
Rad wife.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you think happened? If we look generation to generation to generation, how do we think we got here to where we have feminism and the rise of women in the workplace,
Yeah.
let's say in the 90s and the 2000s, to now this trend where people don't want to work anymore. People don't aspire
Mhm.
to have career as the top priority in their lives anymore for this generation. And that's, of course, generalizing. But what do we think happened in that time period to have this phenomenon?
Okay, first of all, this is our podcast. And so like we ask you the questions.
LOL.
Fine.
Okay, but do you guys want to know more details about this study? They apparently surveyed 23,000 people, which is a substantial, it's a big pool.
Yeah.
And it's not just, US based. The study is like across something like 30 countries, and a third of Gen Z males across the world, right? This is not just in the US, but it includes the UK, Brazil, India. A third of the men said that a husband should have the final word on important decisions. So this is happening globally. And so I think, Valarie, like you're asking what's happened, right? Like in the 70s and the 80s, we were like, women are amazing. Like women should go to college, women should be lawyers, women can be anybody. And all of our moms went to work. Like I am from India. My mom has worked her whole life, literally her whole entire life. And I think that's true for y'all's moms as well. And what I think is happening is partly what I think is happening is the things we heard as millennials around being a boss girl, that actually didn't work out for most millennials. That rhetoric of like negotiate your pay and do this and, like go to 18 million networking events a month. That actually has not resulted in closing the gap. Even let's say if the three of us individually have done well for ourselves through our 30s and coming into our 40s, the reality is that the wage gap still stands and has been stuck at 80 cents for white women and 50 cents for Native women, and a range between 50 and 80 cents, right? And like queer, like women identifying people are also not doing that well, right? They also experience a pretty significant pay gap. So I think the younger generation is looking at that and is probably asking themselves, well, like these women burnt themselves into the ground, and so why do I have to, right? Like the softer aesthetic, the softer tradwife life, that looks really good to me, not realizing what that actually means. But I think for the men, and I lived in India in my early 30s and started to see some of these things as Modi was coming into power in India, is fascism requires division to be successful. And fascism requires, and patriarchy requires women to be subservient. And so you see this in policies and practices across the world now that are really pushing women down and putting men on a pedestal. And so I know that this is true also of Gen Z men in India, that, they also believe that women should stay at home, that there's no urgency for women to get higher education. And then, of course, that like your wife should obey you. So I think there's many, many things happening. And a lot of it is the orchestration by conservatives to move our world in the direction where they have greater and greater control. That was a lot of words.
No, that's real. And I think, like all of us have been in this work, in culture work, in corporations for a long time. And the age-old debate is like, what is the balance of systemic change versus supporting the worker directly in being able to navigate the system, which I think is really obviously relevant, and why that question was important, Valarie, of like, what, like the cost of trying to fit the ideal is also we keep the system as it is. Like we need to redesign what we think success looks like. We need to redesign the way the bureaucratic system is. We need everything, right? Like we need the overhaul. And when we perpetuate the performance of the ideal worker, we all know this, and probably our listeners know this because you've experienced it, is that we just end up in that same cycle over and over. And so while it is disappointing to see that this is where Gen Z landed, I think to your point, Aparna, is like, well, like, where are we at? This is late stage capitalism, baby. We're like praising CEOs in ways we've never done before. Like the kingdom, we are in like this tipping point of ideal worker modeling that, compared to when Joan wrote this piece in the 90s, I think even then culturally it was a little different. It was about access. So yeah. So who are we modeling around right now? Like, who is the model?
You know who the model is? Did you see the creepy video with Melania Trump and the robot?
No.
No,
Have we not seen it?
we have
She
not
can't-
seen that.
She
Shoot show notes.
released this video, and this robot is literally being touted as like the future of work, and they both walk out side by side. This is who we are modeling the ideal worker after now, a robot. I mean, we see all of these companies. We see these companies with these layoffs saying it's for AI. Block, other tech companies, right?
Every company.
Every company. The ideal worker, this perfection, humans are not, we are never going to meet up to the level of precision a robot can give in certain industries, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we're modeling after robots.
The ideal worker is no worker at all,
Is actually no worker at all.
which is insane. I think, Lars, were we talking about this
I don't
where
even know
I
what
was
to
like,
do.
so, there's like the rise in Silicon Valley right now of investing in zero employee startups, or the goal being a zero employee startup. So at exit, you don't have to share anything with humans, and AI agents don't require RSUs. You don't have to pay RSUs. You don't have to give equity to an AI agent. And people are trying to build zero employee startups.
It's really,
I mean, not to take us to the end of the world scenario, but I mean, like you said, late stage capitalism. I mean, anything is possible at this point.
yeah, we're watching it. And just how like deeply we've lost the plot that I think part of creating a company is to help create work for people. Or just like part of creating something where you're working with other people is to create and share stability in the world. But obviously we're not there anymore. Wild, absolutely wild. And now we are in, to your point, Valarie, this even more anxious, even more hyper striving towards perfectionism. And that has a real impact. And I feel like so in 2023, the Harvard Business Review platform, this research done by Maura Ahrens-Mile about the anxious achiever. Did you all follow that when that came out? No? Okay. So it's a book and a podcast now. And basically, it was just saying what we know. Corporate workers are extremely anxious.
Oh my gosh, I'm married to one of these people. I'm literally married to one of these people.
And part of it, which is absolutely your husband, is that they're saying anxious, you're an anxious achiever. Like your anxiety is a driver in your corporate career. And the resources are more so focused on how do you calm the individual's anxiety as opposed to change the organizational structures that make you anxious. And there's another body of research done in 2020 by like multiple big academic institutions that basically said that there are very specific ways that a company can make you anxious. One is if the culture norm is overly results oriented, which to our earlier point about the salesperson, right? That creates a ton of anxiety. And the research basically was like, people can be intrinsically motivated when they are supported. when they are connected with other people. But in work life, we can't even fathom that. Like, we need the OKR. We need it. And you can also cause anxiety when there's loose standards, or if you don't have like a consensus on what the culture is. So you end up having these like warring factions internally. I don't know if you either experience that in working with companies where it's like marketing department versus, whatever department, and they want to prove that their culture is more important. People get very anxious about that.
We pause there. Have you all ever worked at a company that does the competition like a fitness challenge, and then every department is on a leaderboard?
No, I haven't.
Yeah,
Have you, Valarie?
Valarie
Wow.
has.
Absolutely.
I am
Absolutely. It is weird at best, what happens. But it's meant to like foster team building and, competition, healthy competition, but it just really doesn't quite do that at the end of the day. But yeah, I've definitely seen it.
The weight loss challenge, like the company-wide weight loss challenge, that I have worked at a place that did that.
Yikes.
Yikes.
Yeah.
I don't know what you two are like when you're anxious, but for me, when I'm anxious, my vision of possibility and capacity to connect with other people, it's full survivor mode. So you're very susceptible to saying yes to whatever the person who is in a position of power is saying to you, because you're just trying to meet that mark. And I think it's the same with this performance of perfectionism. I'm curious for you too, when you think about what perfectionism does to us at work, what have you seen?
For me, I mean, you touched on it a little bit with sort of that mental health piece. I think it's really like mental capacity, like the cognitive overload that it takes to try to meet impossible standards is such a drag on your energy, on your cognitive ability to think about new ideas, to have a space for creativity or innovation. I think it really can impact your mental health. And I think I've seen too, like in perfectionist cultures, the bar is always moved, right? So you think that you're reaching something or achieving something, you get there and there's a new bar, there's a higher bar. And so you never get that sense of satisfaction of completing something, of succeeding at something, because there's always something else to achieve. So I think you just get demotivated over time. To your point, you don't bring those new ideas, those new thoughts. You're just, pushing that cog along the wheel and going home and doing it again the next day.
Yeah. I worked for an organization when I lived in India in my early 30s that was run by the CEO. Just, like perfectionism and sort of the ideal workerness in that organization was so intense. I came into a role where I was supposed to take an e-learning product and launch it across the country. And one of my biggest challenge was that in India, you have to be in person to get stuff done. You're not going to get it done over phone calls and Zoom meetings. And she said, I remember her saying to me, she's like, well, what's stopping you from, living in a different city for 2 weeks and then going to a different city? And I was like, ma'am, my mental health is what's stopping me from basically being a traveling salesman full time with no end and stop. And in the end, like I wanted so desperately to make this job work that I had booked over 80 flights in my first year in that job.
Wow.
And that was just the flights. It was not the train travel. It was not the bus travel. It was not the intercity travel, right? It was so much. And then I came to the US. I came back to the States in 2017. And Lars, this is like right around the time that you and I had met and was doing work on the policy side for paid leave. And one thing that I realized was an ideal worker, the perfect worker, not only doesn't have a family, but they're also never pregnant.
Mm.
An ideal worker is not birthing new life, which is how we get any new additional workers. Like, there's literally no other way for us to have new workers. Well, I guess we have robots now and we have our AI agents, so maybe we don't have to have kids. But there's like no way to bring, to have more workers. You have to birth human children, and because I was working on paid family and medical leave. I was like, oh, this is a policy way for a company to enforce being an ideal worker. You make having access to paid leave so painful. And by the way, America doesn't have federal paid leave, and there are less than 10 states in the United States that have paid leave. But you make it so hard through your policies, through your practices. You you experience punitive measures when you do take some version of leave for any kind of caregiving, especially having a kid. And so it's not just the media landscape, it's also like companies are baking this into their policies and practices. And Valarie, like, I'm so curious because you've worked on a lot of policies and practices in-house and now as a consultant. I'm super curious. Where have you seen, like, what are the policies and practices?
I mean, it's all over the talent cycle, right? If you just look at the entire talent life cycle, I mean, we talked about like promotions being tied to billable hours. Oof. I mean, literally translating promotions based on how many hours you can work and bill back for the company. I mean, you mentioned paid time off, but it's interesting. Unlimited vacation is always a red flag for me because I'm like, what's happening there that you have to offer unlimited vacation? And often that utilization of that vacation is not even there because people are scared to take it because they're like, what's happening here? Why are you giving me so much time? Right. But I mean, you can see it all over. It's who and how you hire. It's those job descriptions. How are you describing those jobs? Right. I mean, it's what do you focus on during onboarding? How are you socializing people early into different cultural norms based on what you're telling them to do and the information you're presenting in onboarding, right? It's really throughout the ways that ideal worker, how we want to craft you into the perfect person for us, for our organization, right? In the early days, we're going to really onboard you into that ideal worker profile. So you see it throughout the entire talent lifecycle.
Is there a particularly egregious example of molding a person to be the perfect or ideal worker for a company? We don't need to know which company, but I am curious.
I think that I've seen and I have delivered introduction to inclusion workplace workshops, right? Mm-hmm. And on the surface, it can be a way to communicate skills that you hope people can embody and to demonstrate on their teams and their interactions throughout the organization. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it can turn into a way for us to really overemphasize certain cultural norms in a negative way. So I don't think that's like the most egregious example, but I see how inclusion programs sometimes can also perpetuate some of this cultural norms that we're also trying to actually disrupt, if you will, in the workplace.
Well, something that comes to mind for me and that is related to that, that we haven't talked about yet, and there is research on this too. I can't stop, but not ruffling feathers, like not causing, not like saying that something is wrong, not engaging in any kind of conflict resolution conversations. We've been pacified to litigate immediately if we are in some kind of conflict. And I think in some cases, like overemphasis on inclusion can have like a swing effect where it's like, I can't actually turn to someone and be like, please don't say that, because it becomes a risk. And I saw that and in being in-house, where DEI people are often tapped as being that in between HR or employee relations to try to be able to figure out a different way that doesn't have to be a litigated process.
That's
And,
right.
I think, like, speaking personally for myself, I think some of the success in my career um, has been because I have gotten along with people. And
Mhm.
obviously that's not a bad thing. Like, we want to get along with the people we work with. Like, that's not like, it's not bad. But there is another side of that, of like playing it so you're not causing issues. You're not friction.
Agreeable. Yeah.
Agreeable is a better word. Yeah. Yeah.
Agreeable.
So the art of not ruffling feathers is, I think, really an important part, which is why I think that like full adoption to the company is so important in being the ideal worker, is that you're also not saying, hey, we should change this. I don't need leave. I'm good. Whatever that is.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I want to go back to Valarie. You know what you were saying, right? Like what is egregious, and sometimes the inclusion onboarding,
Mhm.
and it's inclusion has almost, or words like psychological safety or belonging have become stand-in for no friction ever. I
Mhm.
never want to have a negative experience with anybody. I don't ever want to be made to feel bad.
Mhm.
And you guys, I had this client, and I think they fired us. But I had this client, and it was probably like this one of these 101 trainings, and I was giving an example of cultural appropriation, and I talked a little bit about yoga. And then I get a 2-page email from the CEO's EA, who is so upset with me because, and like, this is a white woman. And whatever you want to picture when you like want to picture a white woman who does yoga, like she fit physically and like aesthetically, all of those things. She was so upset with me because did I know that yoga saved her life? And when I used that example, did I not know that like yoga is a powerful tool for like self-empowerment? And I was like, listen, this was an example. Like I'm literally from India. This is the birthplace of yoga. And I'm not saying anything negative about your personal practice. And and then the CEO made me have a mediated conversation with her in person. Literally in
Oh.
person. She was like, you've really upset this person. And I hope that, as a practitioner, you can model what you're preaching.
I.
And I had to
I.
and I had to eat my words, and I had to be like, I'm so sorry. Like I should have seen you more fully. And like I totally see that like yoga like restored your X, Y, and Z. And in my head, I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Uh, yeah. It's a slippery slope. When we when we sort of water down these efforts to the all lives matter level, right? It's important always for everyone to feel a sense of belonging in the organization, of course.
Mhm.
Um, but what can happen sometimes is that we lose that nuance of our differences and the beautiful diversity that makes us different. And that will cause friction. That will cause us to be uncomfortable. And instead of us learning how to gracefully navigate those interactions, we sort of shrink away sometimes from them. So I hate that you had that experience, but I did think of another egregious example for you as you were talking.
Tell us.
And yes, I worked at a certain tech company that it was a norm to work on the shuttle bus on the way to work. So you have a 45-minute drive there and back, sometimes 2 hours, depending on traffic, right?
Mhm.
But the norm was that was work time, right? And I, to this day, I get nauseous in the car because of that time period of my life.
Mhm.
But like that was normalized. It was normalized to be on campus all of the time because we have all these fun things to do, but they really wanted you to work there all the time, right? They wanted you to be on campus because they wanted you to continue to work. And so I think you start to see these kind of industry practices, the tech industry, and that time was very much like competing for talent with all of these toys, right? All of these fun things. But it was
Mhm.
to drive home this point about this ideal worker of what we wanted you to do, how we wanted you to spend your time, where we wanted you to be, right? And how we wanted to really orchestrate how you spend your time and how you actually do your work. So that was, in hindsight, a very was a very socialized way of doing things that was really about how we want the employee to interact with us and engage with us and get their work done.
Oof. Okay, so in my previous life, in my 20s, my partner worked at Microsoft and he would take the connector shuttle, right, which is the company bus
Mhm.
service, essentially. And I remember, like, this is being so naive at like 26 or 27. He was like, "Yeah, it's really great to take this shuttle because there's Wi-Fi on board." And my little tiny naive brain was like, "Why do you need a Wi-Fi on the bus? Like,
Yeah.
for what reason do you need Wi-Fi on the bus?" And, like, you could listen to your music, or you can read a book,
Mhm.
or you could take a nap, you know? And this is the reason, right? Because the expectation is that the bus is comfortable. And by the way, it's not a public bus. So that's the other thing is you don't have to ride with the riffraff. You don't have to
Mhm.
ride with like your fellow citizens. You only get to ride with your peers.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Keep on working.
Mm, mm.
The
Yeah.
commitment. So we know what we're working with, like what the current state is. That feels pretty clear. And I think that there is also a lot of pre-existing wisdom and strategies and ways that we have all worked to try to create a new ideal of worker that serves all people, that is responsible for the way that the company is treating their workers and also treating the world. And Aparna, I don't know, like for on your side, when you think about those strategies, what comes up for you?
Yeah. So I'm curious, have either of you heard of targeted universalism?
Thanks to
Do
you.
you know what?
Thanks to you. Exactly. Yes.
So targeted universalism is it's a policy framework. It comes out of public policy, right? And it says that we set an ambitious goal for everybody, but using tailored strategies or designing to help specific individuals reach that goal. And one very, very common example of targeted universalism would, is often like, what would you do to help a single Black mom achieve X goal? Right. And because her identities sit at the intersection of so many oppressions, single parenthood, being Black, being female. And and so something that I've been kind of tossing around in my head is, what would that look like? What would using targeted universalism look like at work? And I got another dose in this framework last night. I was hosting an event for a friend who's running to head up the Board of Education in Chicago. And he talked about his focus on kids. And I was like, of course, I agree. Like, kids are important. And he said, what would it look like if what would it look like if the question we asked was, are kids learning? And he said that he had audited like hundreds of hours of school board meetings, and he also was an appointee on the Chicago Public School Board for a couple of years. And he said, if we met for 150 hours, maybe 10 of those hours were spent talking about student learning. Right? Your role, your governance role is to make sure kids are learning. That is literally the reason public schools exist. And so I'm curious, I want to hear from both of you, what if we applied this framework of targeted universalism to work, what would we focus on? What would be that ambitious goal? And what might be a targeted strategy to help a specific group that helps us get to that goal?
Yeah, I mean, as you were talking, it doesn't sound much dissimilar to a design principle we use all the time in DEI. I shouldn't say all the time, but that we like to employ around the curb cut effects. And
Yes.
right,
Mhm.
right. The curb cut is the little dip that you see on sidewalks, and they originally was designed for wheelchair access, but we all use it, right? When you have luggage, if you have a stroller, right? And so the idea of that with a design principle, when you're designing for change within an organization, is that you design for the most marginalized person,
Yep.
right? And so first you have to identify who that is in your organization, right? And I love this example of this single Black mom, right? That sits at these intersections. You first need to understand, what are her barriers, right? What has actually happened with her? Let's get to the core and the root of those problems, right? And then you design from a theory of change from those barriers that you're solving for that particular person. And guess what? And when you do that for her, the experience improves for everyone else. That's what the curb cut effect says, right? So you think about the most isolated person in your organization and solve their problems, and I guarantee you the rest of your organization is going to benefit from those solutions.
Yeah. Lars, what comes up for you? What's up an ambitious goal and maybe a strategy?
I think the complement to this around the actual business structure in how if we want workers to show up in a specific way, like we're altruistic, we are committed, we are kind to each other, whatever those qualities are, there are organizational structures that we already know exist to help make that outcome possible. So a culture that is focused on teamwork and employee development, helping people grow. If you see your customers as partners and not just people you're selling to, if you're focused on a humane work environment, that actually, and that, all of those things feel like kind of fluffy to say in absence of policy, but that does create the conditions where the curb effect or targeted universalism can be possible because the values are there. When we try to design on top of an organizational culture values like hyper competition, the carrot sticks with reward and punishment, it's also not possible. And you can do another like culture design where it could be more dynamic, entrepreneurial, creative, where if you want to be a culture that's focused on taking risks, you can do that, but you have to be very flexible and you have to be responsive rather than hyper bureaucratic. And all of this is studied. Like we know that this is what exists. But I think again, like the ever-present question in our conversation today is if we're talking, I think talking about the system versus the worker is really important because the two of them are just doing this dance constantly. But you have to honestly look at what is the company value on top of who is the most marginalized worker. And through that, you can actually create a design that works.
Okay, can I offer you both something a little bit? I've just been mulching on this and you could tell me to shut up once you hear it. So targeted universalism, the curb cut effects, right? These design principles or policy frameworks typically designed to the edge, and the edge is the person who's the most marginalized. And I have just been sitting with this idea, which I have honestly been a little afraid to say out loud. So we might have to ask Ari to cut it. What if our ambitious goal was happiness? And we could answer the question, are my employees happy? Are the people that I work with happy? And the edge that we design to is white men at work. What strategies? Because I feel like they're so unhappy, they're so lonely, they're so mean and so entitled. Not all white men, just saying that. Lars, thank you for being here. But what if we said, like, our goal is our workers are happy, and then we design for white men to be happy at work. Is that insane?
Lars, I'm gonna let you go first. I'm gonna noodle. I'm gonna noodle on that.
On behalf of all white people, I think what you're talking about is important in the sense that, and this is data is common now. White men are most likely than any other demographic to end their lives by suicide in the United States. There's an incredible amount of pressure that exists to be solely devoted to your career and the value of being a provider above anything else. There's plenty of data that shows that white people have been essentially bred out of our capacity for empathy. And so being able to actually connect with people and check when apathy is coming through is something that we have multiple generations of relearning to do. So yeah, I think that, is happy the right term? I don't know. I think it gets us close. But I think the question that you're asking is that the way I'm interpreting it and the way that I have completely pivoted my career to focus on is, are these the working conditions that actually work for the majority too? And if we take white men as the sample and we look at the data, we can say probably not. Mark Anderson, what's his name? Andreessen, sorry, 2 E's, flexing that he's not introspective. It's like, bro, that's actually how we track diagnosing psychopathic symptoms.
And he actually said great men don't sit around and think.
Right.
And I was like, literally, that is all of the great men in history. That's all they have done is leave a legacy of hundreds and thousands of letters that they wrote to each other about what was going on.
Yeah.
And they're the OG influencers. They're like the gal that is has 18 TikTok reels a day. That is the great men of history. All they do is think and write about thinking.
Yeah, and there's so much to say. And I think it is a really good example too, because that is this is the model that he was taught. And the rest of the world is looking at him now and we're like, that's not greatness. We don't think it's cool that you're a billionaire. That's not actually what we think greatness is. But what they have been fed is that. And yeah, one of the biggest questions Aparna and I asked in choosing to do this project is, how do we support the people with the most material safety in the world to see that this also isn't working for us? And bringing that to white men is pretty compelling. That's it is its own curb analysis.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't think it's too edgy.
I mean, let me say this. You may be onto something. It's interesting you brought up Mark Andreessen. It just may not be my work, but it has to be someone's work.
I got
right?
it.
Yeah.
And so I remember I've worked with dozens of clients, and there's only been a couple of clients that it just didn't work out. And one of those clients was a venture capital firm. And I remember it was the end of 2020, early 2021. And they hired me to do a series of conversations with their team. And the first conversation, what they wanted was a interesting intellectual discussion around the dynamics of what was happening in the world. What they did not want was that introspection of, how did I participate in that?
Right.
How am I perpetuating some of these issues? What can I do to change some of these things? They didn't want any of that, right? And so it was just a mismatch. And I think you're right. When your North Star continues to be capitalism over everything, money over everything, that's going to be the driver of all of your decisions. And so it just trying to have a humanity conversation was just so out of left field for them that we just parted ways. We just cut the contract, right?
Okay.
Because we just had different goals. And like we had different goals and we had different perspectives on what was most important for us to focus on right now and what unique impact they could have to start righting some of these wrongs. And so
Oof.
it's not my ministry, it's not my work, but it's needed because this community holds so much power. And I think we can't not engage. We can't not try to engage with this population. So let me know how that works out for you.
I'll keep you updated.
If all of the threat.
Well, I wanna come back to Joan Acker and actually ask Aparna to read this quote, because we're talking about like, yeah, who is this new ideal that we want to design for? And Joan kind of said it in 1990. So Aparna, we do us the great honor.
Yeah, Joan Acker, a badass human. I read Joan Acker when I was in grad school, and that ages me somewhat. So here are some things she says. She says, such a transformation would be radical in practice because it would probably require the end of organizations as they exist today, along with a redefinition of work and work relations. The rhythm and timing of work would be adapted to the rhythms of life outside of work. Caring work would be just as important and well rewarded as any other. Having a baby or taking care of a sick mother would be as valued as making an automobile or designing computer software. Hierarchy would be abolished and workers would run things themselves. Of course, women and men would share equally in different kinds of work. Perhaps there would be some kind of communal or collective form of organization where work and intimate relationships are closely related. Children learn in places close to working adults, and workmates, lovers, and friends are all part of the same group.
No notes.
It's no notes. You know what that sounds like? A village.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Everyone's aligned to their purpose.
Yeah.
Everyone's unique skills and talents are being honored. We're human first. We're
Mhm.
actually human first, right? So no notes.
No notes. Yeah, Joan says simply, we're producing goods, caring for people, and disposing of the garbage. That's her headline. And I think that's it. But we got to name it to change it. Shall we switch gears? Shall we do some rapid fire fun together that we did not prepare
Let's
you
do
for,
it.
Valarie?
Let's do it. I'm ready, I think.
I'm happy to read them, Valarie, and then Aparna, you want to follow?
Oh my God. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't prep either of you for this. Okay. And then it's become a tradition on the podcast. So, Valarie, rapid fire, don't think too hard. First sentence: the white collar workers' greatest superpower, if they chose to use it, is
Efficiency.
Ooh, I was going to say organization.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, our deep devotion means that we can do that and we can flex that somewhere else. Yes. Okay, Valarie, what is your favorite corporate phrase? Obviously, ours is circle back. What's your favorite corporate wording?
Let's table that until tomorrow, or let's table that to after the holidays. Yeah.
Yeah.
Low hanging fruit. Let's go after the low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
What's a corporate phrase that white collar workers say that actually means I'm scared or I'm worried?
I'm scared or I'm worried. So part of you have yours, go.
Mine is I'm seeking strategic alignment before moving forward on something.
Okay, I'm gonna say I was gonna say circle back, but no, let me get back to you for that.
Yes. What's one thing the system never told white collar workers about their own power?
It relies in authenticity.
Ooh. I would say that they have power.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, last one, Valarie, and this is just for you. If you could say in one sentence directly to every white collar worker listening to this right now, what is possible on the other side of breaking the myth of the ideal worker, what would it be?
True human-centered partnership where all parties involved are mutually benefiting from the partnership is possible. That's it.
Ooh. Is she a marriage therapist? We don't know. Okay, we close out every episode. Unfortunately, the end of our time together is here, with one takeaway each and one thing that you invite listeners to do this week. Not something you could do months from now, but like what's something that they can do today? And we'll model it because we'll have Lars go first. One takeaway, one thing you can actually do.
This is just a big theme right now for my coaching clients where they're trying to balance actively figuring out how to fit into whatever the norm is at their company while trying to maintain their sense of self or integrity. And sometimes we can turn it on and be happy, like tuck in our shirt, say, let's table it, and you're in the groove. I've been happily ignorant before and performative in corporate spaces, playing the game as a strategy. And the point of this podcast is to give workers a different vantage point of how to ask, what is the cost for us? And so my offer for this week is take some time with a coworker or two and just ask them the question, who do you think is the ideal worker here? And is this ideal aligned to who you are as a person outside of work? Literally just ask those two questions. A lot of what we're trying to do here is give us language to actually see what's going on. And some people might say, yeah, this is who I am. I'm a full NPC and I love it. And some people might surprise you and you can learn about what they actually care about. So let's work towards asking questions where we can change the future together and you can actually start to see the person next to you in their well-being, their humanity. And yeah, if we're going to change the world, we have to be honest about what we're doing. So that's what's up for me.
Oof. That honest piece is big, right? When I think about the vision for the future ideal worker, I think of honest relationship to the organization on both sides,
Okay.
right? I think we have to get out of the delusions of family, of a workplace being completely your identity. I think we just have to be honest about the transaction. And so my gift is first you have to be honest to yourself. And I think that starts with personal alignment. And so my offer and what is coming up for myself and a lot of clients these days is what does a true alignment look like for you individually? And what does alignment look like as you develop these partnerships, these contracts with these organizations? Understand what that alignment looks like, but first start with alignment for yourself, in yourself.
Beautiful.
Oof. Mine would be take the heels off, right? Like you don't have to wear uncomfortable shoes and extend that metaphor into whatever parts of your work life you need to extend it into. Buy yourself a pair of ultras, enjoy the white toe box. It makes a difference.
I do.
Yeah. Valarie, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great. I love this podcast. I'm so excited to continue to watch and see where this goes. Best of luck to you too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yay.
Okay, folks. On our next episode, we're going to keep going and we're going to talk about psychological safety and psychosocial hazards at work. There's such a big global field of research in how other countries, honestly, are making workplaces safer for humans. And my really dear friend and colleague, Dr. Nicole Decay, is going to be with us on that episode. And we hope that you'll tune in to this and that, all of them.
It's a good one. You don't want to miss it. It blew my mind the first time I learned about the fact that there are these hazards that are well documented. We know what work is doing to us. So please join us. And we want to hear from you, Circle Back Club. We are collecting stories from workers who are sharing their aches, their hopes, their reactions to our episodes all around corporate work. We want to be able to give a voice to people who can't quite say it out loud because you're on the inside. And we want you to know that you're not alone. So if you have a story, please share it with us via email, written, or audio recording to hello@circleback.club. I'm Lars.
I'm Aparna.
We'll circle back.
Thank you.